Hello, Grand Rapids and all of YouTube. My name is Jeremiah Bannister, and I'm the host of PaleoRadio, and I'm a host of PaleoRadio. The other host of PaleoRadio is Joe Elder. And Joe, how are you today, my friend?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing awesome, man. I have had a totally awesome week, a totally awesome weekend. This weekend, I did my first ever pie eating competition, man.
How would that go?
Oh, dude, I was fandangled. They tricked me, right? I went and it was whipped cream, okay, and the goal was to find gummy worms. They had gummy worms in the whipped cream, and if you had four gummy worms and you could find the four gummy worms, then you won a whole bunch of cool stuff, right? And they had first, second, third, so on and so on. And so I'm the DJ for the event. It was at the Byron Fun Spot, a roller rink in Byron Center. And I'm doing this, and I was just, dude, I was devouring it. I mean, I was literally just going to town on this plate of whipped cream. Dude, we had one worm in that thing. And I got done, and I'm like, you guys tricked me. By that point, it was everywhere. I mean, I just had it. It was all over my shirt. It was all over my bow tie. It was all over everything, man. And but dude, it was so great, and to see so many cool kids and so many cool costumes. And so my weekend so far has been awesome. And actually, another thing, this is both you and I both. We watched something over the weekend that was totally awesome, and we're going to talk about it today.
That's right. Yeah, we had a chance to both of us caught the 3 hour long. Well, I wouldn't even call it a debate, but just great conversation between Sam Harris and I always slaughter his name if it's Cenk Unger or Cenk Unger of the Young Turks. I always slaughter it, but it was a great conversation.
Right. It was fantastic. And it really, I'll just say this, okay, because we're not going to lead with this. What impressed me so much about it was that it's the first time I've seen Cenk do anything of that magnitude. I mean, that's a monumental feat. If you honestly think about it, you have 3 minutes or 3 hours sitting across a table here from Sam Harris and going to bat on the issue of Islam, Christianity, psychology. I mean, you name it, culture, everything. Amazing back and forth. And I think both of them had strong points. Both of them had weak points at times. But it was really cool just to see Ching do that. I thought it was just a really great thing. We're going to be talking about that more at toward the end of the program, in fact. So you're not going to want to go anywhere. You're going to want to keep tuning in. And make sure, if you're watching this, make sure you can tell your friends that they can tune into this by going to youtube.com/paleocrat, Paleocrat. And once it's all done, once the program's over, it'll upload automatically, and you can share that link with all your friends. But let's start first with the AA story. Okay,
Yeah.
there was a story. I read this in Reuters, and they were talking about. I think it's Barry Hazel. I don't know if it's Hazel Jr., Barry Hazel Jr. Let's just say that Barry Hazel Jr., 46. He sued parole officials, and this is according to Reuters. Sued parole officials, accusing them of breaching the constitutional separation of church and state, and won the payout, which came to close to $2 million, after the Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals found last year he was entitled to compensation for time he was unjustly held in prison. Altogether, he was held in prison for 100 days. And the backstory to this is that old Junior there was a meth addict. Okay, so he was smoking meth. He got in trouble for smoking meth. He was on parole, right? And he dropped dirty or whatever. However it came about that he was found to still be doing things he wasn't supposed to do. He violated his terms. And so they required him to go into the AA program. Well, he refused to go into the AA program. And in refusing to do so, they imprisoned him. They put him in jail. They put him in jail for 100 days. And so when he got out, he said, this is illegal. This is unconstitutional. And this isn't new, Joe. I mean, this has been around for a while where people have been decrying AA and AA being involved with court-mandated programs for people who are struggling with drug addiction or substance abuse addiction, whatever it is.
It's actually a surprise that it's even taken this long. before
Right.
someone sued. When we break down what AA is, it is entirely a religious way of dealing with abuse, alcohol abuse, and to make it mandated by the government when it is obviously a religious way of solving these problems is a separation of church and state issue. It's very clear cut. It's very clean, and I don't understand why there's even a bit of a problem with it. In fact, like I said before, it's just more surprising that it took this long before somebody even brought this up.
You know, he got the settlement altogether. It was 1 million from the state. Okay, so California doled out 1 million, and 925,000 from WestCare. It's the company that hired by parole officials to provide drug treatment for convicts. He ended up dropping his suit this week because of the settlement, right? But the thing is, I mean, this is a real issue that's been going on for quite a while. And to be honest, I I've been to an AA meeting, I think altogether twice in my life. You know, I went and for different reasons, I was in a situation where I went to one of those meetings, but I didn't know much beyond that, other than my small experience in there, right? And so last night, we're sitting around, we had one of the volunteers, one of the team members for PaleoRadio. He's going to be working with us when we make the move to WKTV. And his name's Nick. And he was over, brilliant, brilliant dude. He's a brilliant mind. And he was talking to us about AA and giving us details about it. That, dude, I had no idea just how religious AA actually was. Like, I knew there were criticisms, but I never really investigated. But last night, it was revelatory for me.
Yes.
I had no idea. This is new.
Yeah, it was entirely new to me. I knew that there was a point where you give yourself up to a higher power, but I didn't know anything about the exact prevalence of how religious it is. In fact, I'm on recovery.org right here, and I can read off the first 3 steps of the 12-step program just to give you guys an idea. Yeah, again, recovery.org. AA step 1. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unimaginable and unmanageable. Okay? Step 2. Come to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And step 3. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. Which is a very interesting way of saying it, God as we understood Him, which kind of is it's a vague open door for religion, right? It could be really anything that you're filling with that, but it's still, this is such a separation of church and state issue. It's just so obvious. It's very clear that this should not be the #1 way that we're dealing with alcoholics through our government system. There's got to be a way where professionals can deal with these people outside of religious tenets.
Yeah, I'm looking here too. There's a couple of the other ones here. Admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. I'm just like, I don't know about that. Like, I mean, I guess admitting it to God, right? If you're in your room by yourself, right, talking to something,
Sure.
you know, whatever, saying. But once you start saying to ourselves and to another human being, you know, I can imagine there being criticisms there. But also, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character, humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings. How is this not like? How
Yes.
is this not religious, right? I mean,
It's absolutely religious.
right.
And isn't it? I would say that it is. It's just on very many levels. It's simply inappropriate. It's preying on people who are in a weak state, and it's putting them in a situation where they don't have any way out of it. And you don't need God to get over alcoholism, and you don't need God to get over addiction. And to say that there has to be some sort of connection there, and that that's a mandatory thing, I think is unreasonable at best.
I do too. You know, and I don't know, and I don't want to say that there's nothing out there, because I know that there is. I mean, even the Reuters article said that California prison officials said the state had since changed its policy to allow convicts who object to a 12-step program to attend a secular program instead. Now, I don't know what secular programs there are. I assume that they're out there. But they definitely don't have the attention of the state in the same way that AA or Narcotics Anonymous, that those do. And drug court is a real thing. In fact, drug court is becoming a prevailing thing within our system. where people are going through, and rather than going to jail, they go to drug rehabilitation, right? That's the one of the main ways that drugs are being dealt with, at least especially here in Michigan and elsewhere. And AA seems to be the default group to go through. And that I don't know what kind of challenges. I'd be interested to know, but it seems like something that we should look at maybe with some urgency.
No, absolutely. There's got to be an alternative. There has to be. It's 2014.
Right.
There's got to be an alternative to a religious answer to alcoholism.
Right. All right, man. Okay, you had a topic. In fact, this is something we talked about. I don't know if it was last week or right after the show or when it was. Oh, we were debating talking about it on the last program, and we decided against talking about it, and we went in a different direction. But you resurrected the interest in this specific topic, man. Introduce that thing.
Yeah, the topic is, it's from the American Conservative. The topic is, or the title of it is, "The Middle East Doesn't Matter." It's by Scott McConnell. And the subscript here says, "Neither ISIS nor any Americans' fair-weather allies are worth the price of the U.S.'s deepening regional commitments." And basically, it's an argument from McConnell of saying, look, there's a list of different countries that we could say are more responsible for handling the ISIS threat than America. Just a few of them right off the top of the bat, it would be Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and even Israel. And he breaks them down and beautifully, McConnell does, where he goes into Saudi Arabia and the reasons why they should be performing with us, or they should be working with us, and why Iran should be, and also why they're not. But he lays out a great argument for more of an isolationist approach to ISIS in the Middle East.
Right. And I went into this article, and I always like McConnell. And I like American Conservative. I mean, I'm actually kind of glad I turned you on to this website. I mean, it's one of those brilliant finds, that you're scurrying through things and trying to find perspectives from different angles, and trying to stomach it as you do. This is an easy one to stomach most of the time. I mean, there's a couple every day. There might be a couple things that they'll share that I'm just kind of like, blah. But they've got great stuff, especially when it comes to the surveillance state, when it comes to the police state, when it comes to the drug war, when it comes to interventionism, things generally associated with more of a libertarian political philosophy. But they're really, really good on it. And yeah, he was going through, and he was saying, here you've got ISIS just rampaging through Iraq and through Syria. And all these world capitals are talking about this topic, but it brings up a really, really good question. Who would win a contest to be named America's most worthless Mideast ally? And I loved how he said it. Competition is fierce, but three countries are clear forerunners. Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Israel. Yes. And those three together, each one, and he just tears each one a new one.
Yeah, he does.
It's brilliant.
He brings up a few really good points that I like. Number one is, and this would be an argument I would say for why we have to at least consider action there, is when he brings up Saudi Arabia, he says in quotes, "What do the Saudis do with their shiny F-16s and spanking new tanks? One might have hoped to see Saudi forces in action against ISIS, which really hasn't had any success against a military formation that hasn't been systematically trained and adequately armed. But this isn't happening, probably because the Saudi leaders realize that a great many Saudis, a majority in question mark parentheses, actually agree with ISIS's ideology, and there's no guarantee that they wouldn't defect to ISIS if called upon to battle." Which that alone, if there is an argument for why we should be considering intervention or at least watching what's going on there, it would be that a wealthy country like Saudi Arabia may have a good majority of people who do believe in the tenets of ISIS and want to subscribe to that, and therefore they wouldn't be able to fight as well as they think they would as a unified country.
ISIS wants Mecca, right? I mean, they have ambitions. They have regional ambitions, right? And so how are the Saudis dealing with this? Like you were saying, what are they doing? What would they even be able to do if they tried? We don't know. I mean, they gobble up tons of our
Yes.
stuff, right?
And if you think about it from their point, if I was a political pundit in Saudi Arabia, one thing I would be pushing for would be, I don't know if it would be a good idea for us to make a necessary staunch line in the sand at this point. I know that sounds irrational to us all the way over in the West, but the reason is because there is a good majority of Saudi Arabians who may hold those tenets of ISIS to be true and rather fight for them than fight for the Saudis, fight for the country of Saudi Arabia. And so if you draw a line in the sand, you're basically saying now you have to choose a side. And I think they may be worried about what the repercussions of that would be.
Right, because there are so many people in Saudi Arabia who happen to believe things that agree with ISIS. I mean, and Saudi Arabia, and this is the weird thing. I mean, because Saudi Arabia is an ally of ours, right, geopolitically. But when you talk about the people of Saudi Arabia themselves, right, and what their beliefs are, they're pretty radical, right? In fact, they're the most radical of all the different Muslim nations, right? I mean, this is the most radical of the bunch, and so they're kind of in a tough spot too, especially a tough spot, I guess, and they're not going to move. Turkey, right? Turkey, they're a member of NATO. Right? I mean, they're at a very strategic place, right? The article was talking about bridging Asia and Europe, right? It has a considerable middle class, millions of educated and highly trained citizens, and they've got this aggressive extremist Sunni movement beheading people. Mm-hmm. And what do? What do they do? They're where are they? What is the urgency for them, and why are they choosing to deal with other things, right? Yes. Other dangers, right? The one they're focusing on right now has to do with the Kurdish minority. Yes. So you say they're focusing on something else, and the bigger question, I guess, that arises from that is, what should this tell us about the threat, right? And same thing with Israel, and finish up with Israel, because this is where I loved before the show. We're sitting there, we do our thing before the program, getting ready. We have this banter going back and forth. We're studying, we're looking at different topics and trying to get quotes and the like. And he's going through, and he just stops, and he's like, "Bro, Israel." He's like, and so just
okay,
yeah.
So this is I'm going to preface it by what McConnell had said about Israel, because I think he did a really good job about it. He said, once again, events illustrate what utility Israel has had as a regional ally when crunch comes. Faced with unforeseen, rapidly moving, and dramatic crises, Americans watch as Israel does absolutely nothing except antagonize the Muslim world further by announcing new land seizures so more illegal settlements can be built in Jerusalem. Of course, this isn't without precedent. Israel was of no help in the first Iraqi crisis, and of course no help in the second, beyond providing a parade of primetime cheerleaders to encourage George W. Bush to lurch into war, which is exactly right. This is a country that is in the Middle East that already has a line drawn in the sand ideologically. They're not like Saudi Arabia, and they're not like Turkey, where there is already an ideological difference between this country and the others, and they hold Western values to be their moral compass in Israel. And if that's the case, they are the closest, most prudent ally for us in the Middle East that we could rely on. The thing is, they're not there. They don't exist. Israel is not anywhere to be seen. They don't even have to abide by our nuclear arms treaties. They could possibly have more nuclear weapons than we do. They're not in the UN. Israel is unabatedly the most militaristically organized country in the Middle East, and they hold different ideological values, and they will do nothing. And that puts them, to me, at the forefront of being to blame for lack of intervention.
You know, nobody expects Israel to be involved. And that's the weird thing for me. I mean, we just watched the military domination of Palestine and Gaza, right? We watched the entire world was witnessing the military escapades of Israel and their domination in that region to say, look, you can't touch us. Try shooting a missile, kaboom, we knock it out of the sky. You ain't gonna hurt us. And they have that kind of power. They have that kind of weaponry. They have that kind of money from the United States, and yet their involvement is little more than the talking head circuit on Sunday mornings, to come over here and to remind us about the Holocaust and how America was necessary for World War II, and we need the leadership of America right now in much the same way. And then they walk away.
Yeah.
And I said this before the show, I'll say it again. They're not in the concentration camps anymore. They have freaking nukes. Right? They have a nation. They have a government. They have a military, one of the strongest militaries. They have some of the best military technology in the entire world, in all of human history. They have much of this. And yet, the way that they're peddling this entire thing about American obligation, it would seem as if we're right back in the haze of war of World War II. And you sit there and you say, times have changed, so has Israel. Right? So is Israel. Why don't you buck up? Why don't you be involved in this? Why not Turkey? Why not Saudi Arabia? Why not the regions and states and nations that have good reason to actually be terrified, right? Terrified of the barbarians at the gates, because they're there, right? They are there, and yet they're coming and they're knocking on our door and saying you need to get involved. What really did it for me with this piece by McConnell was this, and I'll just quote him at length, and I absolutely love this. I encourage people, please go check it out. It's called "The Middle East Doesn't Matter. Neither ISIS nor any of America's fair-weathered allies are worth the price of the U.S.'s deepening regional commitments." Scott McConnell. But he says this. He said, and I might even do an extended quote, so give me a minute. Might there be a silver lining in all this? As we witness the emergence of a violent new force, simple realism forces upon us the fact that the friends we've been wooing for decades just don't see it that way. They may not like ISIS, but for various reasons, they have other fish to fry. That should tell us something about the strategic vision underlying our policies for the past 2 or 3 decades. But here's where it ends, and this is where it's good. What silver lining? Because he mentioned, is there a silver lining in this? What silver lining? It's rooted in the fact that the Mideast may now actually matter much less than we think it does. Right? We do have the option of pretty much ignoring it if we choose. Its contribution to the world economy is negligible. Its oil will reach the markets one way or another. The security and well-being of the American people is not linked to the survival of a Shiite regime in Baghdad, a medieval monarch in Riyadh, or, for that matter, a Jewish state in Jerusalem. Recognition of this fact is only beginning to seep into the discourse. Justin Logan argues persuasively here, and he has a link, that virtually nothing that goes on in the Mideast can threaten us very much, that no country in the region is worth starting a war over, and that the amount of money we've spent combating terrorism in the region is wildly disproportionate to the actual threat.
Exactly.
There it is. There's the hammer. Right? Yes, there is the hammer. Do we really need to be all wrapped up in this? Does it need to concern us at all? And I'm with McConnell. I have no hesitancy whatsoever in telling everybody. I'm with McConnell. The Mideast can screw itself in many ways, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, obviously, diplomatically, I would still think that the United States should be involved. I think we should be diplomatically involved all over the place. I'm not an isolationist on that score. But when it comes to military intervention, no way. I forget who it was, Joe, but somebody said, too, just recently, that there's no reason why we couldn't just go in. It might have been Sam Harris, in fact. There's no reason why we couldn't just go in and take care of this or be involved in this in a way that doesn't involve the military whatsoever. And, in fact, that has to do with the SEALs or the Rangers or any of these other groups, that they could do it, and that it really shouldn't even concern much of what we do over here and what we talk about over here.
Well, and the issue I have with having even the SEALs be involved in it is that provides such a shadow cover, and it's an obvious involvement by our government to the people that live there, where they would still feel provoked by the West. I think removing the threat of provocation from us as Western society is a huge thing that would lead to better safety for us. I truly believe that. Less meddling in the affairs of other countries, less intervening between sovereign nations, less flying our military vehicles in sovereign airspace. I think that those are answers to issues of radical Islam or just radical terrorism. It's answers to people like ISIS. Especially if their countries that are surrounding them are not willing to deal with them at this point, then why are we going to drive 12 or fly 12,000 miles across the world to get to them and do this for them? Why? Why us? Why send our poor to fight the rich man's war over there? Why do it? And when I say rich man's war, I'm talking about every time we go to war, there is an incentive for money, because every single metal machine that goes out there to kill people makes a buck for somebody. Halliburton makes big money when we go to war. But all that aside, that's a separate argument for being an interventionist. But the purest one would be, it doesn't affect our safety right now. It does not affect our safety. And until it does, we don't have a right and we don't have a reason to be involved there. Period.
We have just cause for ignoring it.
Yes.
We have just cause for ignoring it, for telling them we don't need to get involved in this. This is your religious infighting. This is your geopolitical infighting, whatever, but it's not our business. And most importantly, it's not our business yet, right? I'm more opposed to the idea that we lead the charge, right? That the United States has to be the one to grab the bull by the horns and say, we're going to go ahead and do this. If anything, we should be late to the party. I think we should do like we did maybe in World War II. I think being late to the party. I know that a lot of people might say, whoa, that sounds terrible. That's what we did. And even after being late to the party, they still come to us now, and we are the ones who came in and helped to fix things and to make things right, and that they want us to be the ones to lead the charge from here on out. I don't think that should be our role whatsoever. I think that we have every reason right now to very comfortably sit back and say, I don't mean to sound really terrible to you, but we're very comfortable waiting until things get much worse for you, right? To the point where at least you are doing something on your own, where you're recognizing it as a threat worthy enough even for your own to take up and to fight and say, now we need your help. We're fighting. We're showing you how serious we are about this. We want your assistance and support. Because America's been leading the way for a long time on a lot of things, and it hasn't been good, right? It hasn't been good. It hasn't been good for our economy. It hasn't been good for the way we're viewed around the world, right? And it seems like this kind of lead the way interventionism, it fits the definition that so many people give for insanity, that we just keep doing the same thing and saying over and over and over, and we expect the result to be that the world is going to love that we led the way in this. But we lead the way in something, and then people clamor and say, well, it was a bad decision, it was a bad move, look, you guys are doing it on your own, who are you, you're not the world police. And it's a terrible, terrible situation that I think can be remedied by simply saying, you honestly, at this moment, you are not worth our time. Not militarily, right? And not doling out buku bucks for this. You're worth our time diplomatically. If you want to talk to us, if you want us involved in your strategy, however that is, that would be worthy of our time, worthy of our money, worthy even of our sacrifice. Beyond that, as of right now, if you don't find it to be a big deal and the barbarians are at your gate, then we shouldn't find it a big deal when we're across the Atlantic and on the other side of the Pacific, either which way you go.
I agree. No, I agree entirely. I think that we'd have to see some action by the surrounding countries first before we should be intervening. The idea of, well, you broke it and you got to buy it, right? I disagree with that entirely. There are many, many reasons why the Middle East is in turmoil, and a lot of them have to do with religion. A lot of them have to do with a lack of resources, and those are two things that have been there long before American intervention was there. Long before 1950, Sunni, Shiite, and Kurds were fighting for territory and space in the Middle East. And long before American interventionism, there was plenty of infighting over just resources, areas of space, where they can allocate these resources. Those are things that have been going on across the world, let alone in just the Middle East. And we cannot solve all these problems, especially with bullets and bombs.
Bullets and bombs hardly solve anything.
Ever.
I mean, they just don't. They are. I guess they're good for destabilization,
Yes.
right, and demoralizing a group.
Well,
Right?
yes.
That makes sense, right? But as an end game, that well, if we just bomb enough, this is going to magically from the bombs, uh, wondrous things are going to arise.
Mm-hmm.
That's mythical thinking.
It is mythical.
That's
People think
right.
the bomb is the end of the story, right? We're going to bomb them, boom, it's over. But actually, bombing is a transition if you're writing a story. It's a transition from one story to another. Perhaps you've ended something, but you began a whole nother campaign. One misplaced bomb that blows up one house that's full of innocent people could produce 20, 30 anti-Western fighters. One bomb misplaced. The repercussions for that are so great that they're not worth executing. You can't bomb ideas. You can't shoot ideas. And there's no way of bombing it out of the Middle East.
And they don't go away like bad guys.
Absolutely.
Right? Like in movies, like you were saying last week or the week before, that there's this kind of idea that runs through our culture that if we just go and bomb the bad guys, that they'll disappear. And it's begging the question to assume that there's just a bunch of really good people that won't get bombed, and that once the bad guys are bombed and they're all gone, that vacuum will just be filled by the good guys that are left because the bad guys are all dead. Right? And that's kind of, I mean, in reality, that's kind of a pop foreign policy perspective in the United States, in a wildly popular one, right?
Yeah.
It just is.
We've heard people say that ignorant, well, for lack of a better term, it's just ignorant shit. Oh, just go bomb them. Turn the place into a parking lot, right? People that say that sort of stuff have no clue about the repercussions of serious actions. There are people that I think really hold that to be true, which is sadistic and sad, but they do think that's the answer. That is not how you do it. It's like a dry erase board. You might be able to erase a few off. That's going to produce more. There's going to be more people coming up to fight for one innocent life than there will be for the amount of bad people you think there are in the world. There will always be people who want to right a wrong, and bombing typically produces more wrongs than rights.
And as with the dry erase board, so with reality, that there's a residue left. Even if you erase it, if there are people who strongly believe that the words up on that board should always be there, you can erase it, but you have that faint outline of the letters that remains on those dry erase boards, and people can go and just rewrite over those letters again or rewrite the same letters. Reality is a difficult and complex thing. Speaking of difficult and complex, though, the Sam Harris situation. This is the second time we've touched on this, man. We talked about it. Was it last week or was it the week before? The last 2 weeks have kind of been a blur a little bit.
I believe it was last week.
I believe it was last week. We talked about Sam Harris. He was on Bill Maher's Real-Time program because we talked about Reza Aslan and his interview. I'm trying to remember where it was. I don't know if it was MSNBC. I think it was MSNBC.
I think it was. Or CNN.
CNN. Yeah. And so we talked about that. Well, I was excited. One of the friends of PaleoRadio, he's been a fan for a long time. His name is Jason, and he shared it on my wall. He shared this 3-hour-long discussion, back and forth, between Cenk from the Young Turks and Sam Harris. And so I said, you know what, I'll watch this. I didn't know it was 3 hours, dude, when I clicked on the link. I had no clue that it was going to be so long, right? So I click on it. I was thinking it's going to be a small interview or whatever. Oh, no, dude. This was, in fact, I would argue it is probably one of the deepest exchanges that I've ever watched that wasn't formatted as a debate. Right, like I'm a nerd. I watch debates. You know, William Lane Craig versus Bart Ehrman, or Robert Price versus whoever. You know, I love watching debates all the time. Hitchens, I loved watching Hitchens debate and others. Those are formatted to be that way, to be really deep, to be really heavy at times, to require a lot of thinking, and for you to stay on track. You'd be good to take notes. This is one of those things, right? This is one of those. You could watch, literally, if you watch that whole 3 hours one time through and say, you'd go back and want to watch it again, and next time with a pen and some paper, right, to write down some notes because it was so good.
It was deep and it was mentally taxing. I had to take a break from it. I got an hour and a half and had to take a respite. But I mean, it's mentally taxing. That I credit Cenk for basically the stamina of it. I mean, Sam Harris has been known to be someone who can go up and have a debate for 3 hours, 4 hours, no problem. Cenk's a whole different ballgame where we've seen him in a new element here where engaged in very deep thought and deep conversation for that long is extremely taxing, and I just credit him for a great job. I think he did a very good job, and I think Sam Harris did a very good job as well.
I do too, and yeah, it is taxing, and it was mentally taxing watching it. I'm with you. I got to about an hour and 45 minutes, and I said, man, I got to just stop this for a minute. I mean, this is really, this is heavy. This is a lot of information to try to digest. So I took a break. I paused and I walked away from it. But there were some things that were said that were really good. I liked how Sam Harris said he's not concerned to just criticize the doctrine, right? That it's not simply, well, those beliefs are bad, right? But the question then becomes about believers and how these beliefs, right, that you can take from Islam, how these beliefs impact, as they are understood and lived out, how they impact individual Muslim believers in and around the world. And it was interesting how he defined Muslim world. And I don't really want to go into that right now because I don't know if I agree with him on that. I've been critical of the phrase Muslim world.
Sure.
I've said that it was intellectually lazy to use that phrase. But anyway, he's more concerned with how beliefs impact what people do, right? How they live their lives. And he said that was something that most Western liberals are really hesitant to do. They're really comfortable just criticizing the doctrine, criticizing Islam as some, separate thing floating in the ether or something, that Islam is out there. But don't talk about Muslim people. To do that would be bigoted.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think Harris, when he was explaining the situation about how we just have to be very precise here is basically what he's saying. We have to know that we're not talking about the people that hold the belief. We're talking about how hard or how firmly people actually hold beliefs. And he was saying there's an issue, too, in liberalized Western culture where, especially if someone hasn't grown up in a religious household or fundamentally religious household, they believe that all religion is the same. It's kind of an interpretation of the same thing. And therefore, to comment or bring one out of that pocket of saying they're the same is bigoted in some way, which I find incorrect. In my own opinion, I think of it more like a spectrum. And religion is a spectrum where there are tenets and doctrines that fall along this spectrum, and you can measure, based on beliefs and based on how firmly people hold these beliefs, which ones are better in practice than others. And I think that Sam Harris did a good job of just articulating that there's a group of people, particularly that are in liberalized Western culture, that feel you can't make those sort of distinctions without being racist. And I disagree. I think, I personally think that poll results are real. I think people believe what they say a lot of the time. Now, maybe I'm naive by that, but I think when you do poll results of people who have a doctrine that tell you certain practices are okay, and a high percentage of those people believe those doctrines to be true and believe that to be okay, there's a correlation there.
Right, and I liked how Harris brought that up. Two things you said that I want to mention. First is the spectrum. Cenk thought that they would disagree on that. Harris said no. He said, I believe that it's a spectrum. Mm-hmm. And as you were talking, I went back and I was thinking about a recent poll that was done about conservatives, the spectrum, from being a hard progressive to a hard conservative and everything in between, and their viewing habits for news. And saying, if you look at it, the conclusion was, and I don't know if the article was entitled this, it was somewhere about how conservatives are even more suspicious of mainstream media than you realize, right? That if you take that spectrum, people who are conservative, the way that they hold up certain media outlets is way higher than even the far left in the way they hold up major outlets. So on that spectrum, beliefs may influence people on this part of the spectrum differently than on this part of the spectrum, even though they're both influenced in similar ways. They're influenced in groups to different degrees, right? And you can calculate this with polls.
Yes.
And I thought it's kind of the same thing here with Islam or Christianity or any religion, and say, if you were to do the exact same thing, right, and say, how strongly do they believe that in a literal interpretation, how do they believe that you should apply the texts that are otherwise grotesque, we can find in almost every holy book. I mean, they're there. They're in the Christian Bible and Jewish Bible, rampant with this kind of thing. And so, but where do they believe those things? And if you take them as a whole, and you have Islam, and you have Christianity, you have other ones, how would that spectrum look? And I think I would agree with Harris that for Islam, it would be like conservatives with Fox News. I mean,
Yes.
and Christianity in many ways would be like progressives with MSNBC. Both of them would still have their high points, right? You have a certain number of people who believe that hook, line, and sinker, and who apply it to their lives. But it's not the same. Just because you have people in every group that do that doesn't mean that it's to the same degree by which that group does it over against another group.
Exactly. Well, and that's the tenets, is saying, how firmly do people hold these beliefs, and do they hold them firmly enough to practice them verbatim from the doctrine that they've been given? That's a serious and practical thing. And also, I think Sam Harris, it's not verbatim, but he did a quote where he rationalized this by saying, if I make a comment against communism, I'm not speaking against each individual who holds communism to be true, more than I'm speaking against the ideals and the ideas of communism. Correct? If you take that same exact tenet, if more and more people believe if you disagree with the ideas of communism, and people take the Communist Manifesto verbatim, literally, like we saw in the Great Leap Forward with Mao Zedong in China, if you take that situation, you can say there are bad things that are going to come from this. It's not saying that all Chinese people are awful because they're accepting the tenets of communism. You're saying communism itself has repercussions based on its doctrine that are violent and could be negative in affecting your culture and your community. And that's the same thing he's saying about Islam in the Middle East.
Harris used a scenario, and I fear that in some areas he may have just played it in his favor. It might not even be a very scientific one, right?
Sure.
But he used it, and I think a lot of us can relate to what he's saying. So let's say it. In the scenario, he says this. Let's say we have a remote island, and we put people on there, and we give them the Quran, we give them the Hadith, we give them the biography of Muhammad, right? And we give them all that and say, this is all you need to know about existence and to live and to move and to have your being, right? This is where you're going to get your morals from and your knowledge from. If we came back 1,000 years and we found them living like ISIS, right, with beliefs like ISIS, what Harris said is that we wouldn't be very surprised by that. And I would probably agree with that. I would probably say it wouldn't be like, oh my gosh, how did this happen, right? Where he said on the flip side, and this is what got him criticized, but he said that if you took a different group of people on a different island and you gave them the Bible and the Old Testament and New Testament and said, go ahead and read that, and all you need to do is build your life on this. He said, if we came back 1,000 years later and we saw them living like ISIS, but let's say the Christian ISIS, they were a bunch of Christian Reconstructionists, right? That would be an odd thing. Like it would be, how did this happen? How did this come about? And the reasons for this, and Chink didn't agree with any of it. He's like, I don't buy that. He said because there's terrible texts in the Old Testament that you can find, there's terrible texts in the New Testament that you can find, and so maybe it would turn out that way. Here is the thing, and it led to a really good question. Why do Jews and Christians find it so easy to disregard these texts? Right? Because of course, Chink and anybody else could say, well, you look in the Bible and you can find these texts. The difference is that the New Testament provides, in a very real way, a different hermeneutic.
It's a great
right?
reformation.
It is. It is a reformation within within Judaism. I mean, Jews can call it a revolution, you can call it whatever they want, but it's different. It's not the same thing. And the passages in the Old Testament that talk about this, to the best of my knowledge, and if I'm wrong, I encourage viewers, let me know if I'm wrong about this. But to the best of my knowledge, when you find passages that talk about conquest, those places of conquest were places that were specifically named and given by supposedly divine mandate, right? Saying, these are the nations I'm going to give to you. Go and do this to these people. That if you're not dealing with one of those places, or if you're not Israel for that matter, most Christian people would simply say, well, that was true for Israel, maybe back then, but that isn't something that Jesus wants modern Christians to do. And that's a very easy thing to take away from a reading of the New Testament, because it seems like a lot of what Jesus said contradicts with the Old Testament, and it kind of puts an Old Testament in a certain place within the mind of people who read the two of these testaments together. So to give them this book, and then to say, well, if you just give them this book and you just let them go, that they're going to all turn into a bunch of Christian Reconstructionists that stone gay people, that would be highly unlikely, right? And so I would agree with Harris on that it would be highly unlikely. And I think it says maybe an awful lot, and unfortunately maybe not so much at the exact same time.
Well, I think, well, to be honest, if I would have been Cenk in that situation, I think I would have argued it a little bit differently, because I am a little bit on the fence. I believe that the Old Testament is the most violent book that there is, and I believe that people are impressionable, but I think it's a timeline, right? There's certain situations, and Sam Harris brought this up, where he brought up the case of stem cell research, saying that Islam gets a pass on stem cell research because they don't believe that souls go into the body until day 80 or day 120, depending on what hadith you believe. If that's the case, they get a pass on stem cell research in a way that Christianity doesn't. That's a blind spot for Christianity, where it's not for Islam. And I can give an example where I think that we could be more concerned with Christian doctrine sooner than we could be concerned with Islam, by way of global warming.
Right.
The reason I say this is because on the timeline, as the timeline shifts, if we see massive rises in ocean levels, and we're seeing massive destruction around the world, we could be getting Christian apocalyptic preachers going to Revelation and using that as saying, this is the end times coming, this is something to be concerned about, this is something we should be very worried about, we need to arm the masses, we need to fight it off, or whatever they want to do. That could be a really real and applicable thing. I think what's important to remember is, if that were the case, there would be people like you and I, Jeremiah, who would say, this is the result of Christianity and result of a Christian doctrine making them do this.
Right.
And there would still be people, mostly liberalized Western people, who would argue with us that it is not the tenets of Christianity that are bringing those people to act this way. And that's what we're getting right now, because the current setting is a pressure cooker for Islam to be violent right now in its state in the Middle East. That could change over time, and it could change to Christianity, but one thing is true no matter what, that the doctrines, the ancient doctrines of both those religions, are the reasons why that behavior can change, and change abruptly in a negative way. And that is the thing that I think we should focus on, more than saying what's worse than is Islam worse than Christianity? Is Christianity worse than Islam? I think it's just saying the amount of people that believe in doctrine and believe in it fundamentally, those people, when they're in bigger numbers, can decimate you as a society and as a civilization, and that's what we should be concerned about mostly.
So it's complex.
It's complex.
It's complex. I know that Chen kept saying, it's complex when it's Christians and Christianity for you, Harris, but it's not complex when it's Muslims and Islam. And I liked how Harris said it's complex for both, right? It's complex for both, but do people actually believe it? And I think that's where Harris has the upper hand here over Greenwald, over the Young Turks, over others, is that they say, yes, people really believe what they say they believe, sometimes to greater or lesser degrees, but to pretend that religious belief is benign, right? That it's like, well, that really doesn't influence it, it's just political matters that influence it. They're not understanding that political matters are filtered oftentimes through religious lenses. You know, there's a reason for newspaper exegesis. There's a reason why so many Christian people will go and read the newspapers with the idea of the end times in hand and try to interpret geopolitical events hermeneutically and to fit it into their end times madness. There's a reason why that happens. That's a real thing. And tons of Christian people, like you said, with climate change, you could mention climate change, you can mention the election of Barack Obama.
Yes.
I mean, there's a number of things. Evolution in schools, right? Sex education, right? That they filter these things, and they filter current events, and various governmental policies. They filter those through their religious lenses of the worldview that they happen to entertain, and that those lenses are not the same for everybody. For some lenses, they're certain shades darker, right? And that's the way it is. So you have to say it's a complex situation. People really do believe what they claim to believe, for the most part, to varying degrees, admittedly, but it's a real factor. And in many ways, it's the ultimate factor, because you're talking about ultimates whenever you're talking about religion. You're talking about what somebody, if somebody were to, a religious person, religion to that religious person, typically, right, would be the ideal that everything is kind of funneled, or everything is understood within that framework. And that touches on, as you said last week, it touches on almost every single aspect of people's lives. Absolutely. For some people, they're able to compartmentalize. Reza Aslan is a perfect example. He's a Westerner who's able to compartmentalize. He approaches holy books in a way that is very modern, right? And I applaud. Thank you very much for doing that. But at the same time, it's not the norm. It's not the norm in the East, the Middle East, or the West. And so you look at it and you say you have to really try to do your best to understand that while it's complex and while you don't want to make these gross generalizations, the number one, polls are important, and they do tell us something about general conditions and people in general. And then to take within that and to look at it and say, to what degree do these individuals believe it, or these nations, or these cultures? To what degree? Is it some? Is it many? Is it most? And how do we then deal with that specific group landing on that specific part of that spectrum?
Absolutely. And this is one thing I hope somebody or the majority of people who are listening to this will get out of this. There is a very big hypocritical element to the left in our westernized society. And I know I keep harping on it, but I don't think people bring this up enough. It's easy for us to say, people in Michigan, for instance, the rape rider bill, right, that went on in Michigan. There's a bill for if you're raped and you're pregnant, you have to have separate insurance in order to abort that baby. These are based on religious tenets. These are based on religion. We know that women not getting paid equally in the West are because of religion. It's easy for us to see that when we're in the West. When we look at Western problems and we see what Republicans are doing, particularly people in the Tea Party and conservative GOP, it's easy to say that these are people exercising religious belief through their politics. So it's easy for them to see that people in Western culture look at life through a lens of religion. What it's not easy for them to see is that people in Eastern culture do the same exact thing. And we need to address that the same way that we addressed it in Western culture, where we acknowledge, at least at bare minimum, that it exists, that there are people that look at everything through the lens of their religion and only conform to things that do make sense in their religion and discard anything else. And that's a way of thinking that we need to dispose no matter where it is across the world.
God complexes are a real thing, period.
Yes.
Right? It's a real thing, and many people are infected with it. Right? Like,
a celestial appeal
under its heavy hand.
Yes, a celestial appeal to authority is very real, and the psychology of that is very real, where we understand, whether it's, the guy in the white coat told me I could take these pills, so now I can take as many as I want. That's the reason why we have the #1 death in America being prescribed pills. The doctor gave me these pills. He's an authoritative figure who told me I can have these. It's the same type of element, except for now it's a celestial being that gives you over-encompassing authority over other people. and you can even take their life in the name of this celestial being. That's terrifying, and that's a real thing. God complexes are real, just like you said.
Yep, the ultimate of ultimates. All right. Talk to us about Southpaws, man. We're almost out of time. We've got about 5 minutes left. It's been a good laid back show.
Mm-hmm.
Right. We didn't flip out. We didn't get all frothy at the mouth. It was fun.
Besides me on Israel, maybe.
Right. You're right. Maybe the Israel thing. So, but say a plug about Southpaws, man.
Yeah, Southpaws is a satirical comedy show. It's kind of based on the idea of three guys who meet in a coffee shop and just talk about politics. So it's very down-to-earth, middle-class, blue-collar work style of politics. But we focus mostly on liberal ideals, although I am not a liberal. But the show is on Tuesdays and Wednesdays from 10 a.m. to 12. And it airs again on Wednesday and Thursday mornings from 12 a.m. to 2. And you can listen to us live and stream or download the old episodes and archive shows from publicrealityradio.org.
There you go. Very good. Yeah, I'm still hoping you guys will be able to get all the kinks worked out for the election night show, because that's going to be fun.
Yeah, me too. I think that's going to be great. I really want that to work out for us.
More information as that rolls along. Okay. 2 updates for me. The first one, I'm going to be speaking in November, 2 different places, dude. One is for the Secular Student Alliance. I'm going to be speaking at Wayland Union High School, and that's going to be a whole bunch of fun. So far as I'm aware, I'm their first speaker. Okay, so far as I'm aware. And if you would like me to speak at your event, if you have a Secular Student Alliance club, you can find my profile at the Secular Student Alliance website. The other thing is this, and I just found this out today, it was confirmed today, that the post office, the people with the Postal Workers Union, they have asked that I speak at an event in Lansing, Michigan, at the Capitol building, and that I'm going to be speaking for about 15 to 20 minutes, and that is going to take place on November 14th. And so more information as that rolls along, too. As I said, I just found out about this. I was just asked about it either yesterday or the day before, and it was confirmed today that they definitely want me to speak there. So I will be in Lansing on November 14th. I'll be speaking about the post office at the Capitol steps there. So it's the first time I've ever done that.
That's going to be a blast, man. I'm excited for you. That's great.
I know. I've been to different events, of course. You know, I went to a couple different ones last year. I wrote about one that was opposing, or that was in support of gun restriction and gun laws, and I reported on it. But I've never had the privilege or the honor to be behind the microphone, right, behind the podium, speaking to the people. So I know I'm going to be shaking in my boots. So everybody, wish me luck. It'll be a lot of fun, man. I'm so excited about it. I can't even begin to tell you. It's such an honor for me to do this. I'm so happy.
Well, I think they made a good choice, man. I really do. I think you're going to do a good job. It's a long time coming, man. Both of us have been looking to get into public speaking, and I'm really happy for you, man. I think that it's going to be the start of something even more beautiful.
I hope so, and I'm excited, and I believe in the post office, right? I believe in this thing. So okay, let me encourage everybody. Find out more about us. You can find us on Facebook at PaleoRadio. Remember, PaleoRadio is one word. We're going to be making a move here. My goal, and I'm terrible with this thing, but my goal is that around Christmas time that we can have our premiere at WKTV, and that's in Wyoming, Michigan. It's right outside Grand Rapids. It's technically part, I guess, of Greater Grand Rapids. And we're looking for people who are interested in taking part in the program. There's all different things that people can get involved with. Everybody who would be involved would be trained on the equipment, which would include lighting and sound and editing, even remote, where you can take out cameras and use the cameras for different things outside of PaleoRadio. But everybody would be trained. Everybody would be on the team, and everyone would find a place that they fit best, something that they really want to do, that they think that they'd be really good at. We'd love for you to contact us, and you can do that by emailing me at jeremiah.bannister@gmail.com. I look forward to hearing from you. I'm excited for all the different people already who've contacted us. We have a great team so far. and I can't wait to see even more people. It's going to be so exciting. Really pumped up about it. So, until next week, my friend.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Yes, and dude, good luck on your show tomorrow. Have fun.
I will. Thank you.
All right, Jeremiah, Joe Elder, on behalf of PaleoRadio, have a great day, my friends. We'll see you next time. Bye.